All right. So the plan is, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 choices for short answer questions. So it's going to be on that capital competition. That's everything, monopolies, corporations. Pay attention to this. Monopolies, corporations, that kind of thing. Also a chance maybe on asking questions about labor unions. But short answer question on capital competition, a short answer question on populism, what we're doing right now, and one on imperialism. And so that'll be one. It'll be a short answer question. You choose one. There'll be an A, B, and C. That means short ID for A, short ID for B, short ID for C. That's a short answer question. Yeah. We've already done those. Yeah.
Did somebody walk out of here with no shoes?
Why are there shoes? Somebody in my study hall. There's a lot of freshmen in there. There's something about freshmen. Somebody was going to ride the range, but they can't ride the range now. That is a really weird thing. That's the first time somebody left shoes. At the end of the day, if they're still there, I'll put them up to auction. All right. So everyone got that? That's what we do for the short answer question. It'll be an A, B, and C. Same kind of thing. All right. So let's go and get going. And we have right here. Do we need the Sherman Silver Purchasing Act?
We got the Sherman Engine.
Oh, so how much? What did they do with the silver they bought?
Nothing.
Yeah. So just no inflation at all. Speaking of that, how you doing? What law or what was the commission that did not regulate railroad rates, even though it was supposed to? Yeah, the ICC. What kind of people were put on the commission? Yeah, the very same people that are supposed to be regulated. It's an issue to this day with regulation. And who was elected president in 1880? Garfield. And Garfield, what happened to Garfield? Who assassinated him? This time no anarchist. He wasn't an anarchist. He wanted a what? Yeah, Charles.
Because he wanted a job.
Who was the Democrat elected in 1884? Uncle Grover. But then he lost in 80. He lost in 80 what? 88. To Harrison. Okay, got your phone away. Look it up what? Quick, look it up. So where are we at here? Sherman Silver. Oh, and you notice I use this? There's no reason for this.
Oh, just a little O.
Yeah. Usually just an O.
I've never seen anything.
I always do those.
Mr. Partridge.
I've ruined everything. Oh!
Flamingo Friday.
Oh my goodness, Mr. Partridge.
I gotta shut the light off, right?
You're just
Here we go. Well, ready for it? No! Yeah! Woo! That was close. So do we get to here?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to this. All right, so do we get to monopolies equal restrained trade? Do we get to the last part? The problem was, it said that a monopoly by its very nature was illegal. A monopoly was illegal because of what it could do for controlling the market. It keeps out competition. Remember monospony, where they are the only buyer of goods. But also it is completely and totally, the law was indecipherable. It was impossible to enforce and law for holding companies. In fact, we're the first that mentioned this about who's What's that?
Since you're talking about how Amazon's the first monopoly to sue a lot.
Well, no, they're monopolies before, but Amazon was the first one in a long time. The first 15 years, the only group ever brought up for restraint of trade were labor unions, which is the exact opposite of the intent of it, even though, trust me, the people who wrote it didn't like labor unions. And so, the point is, ICC promised to do something, did this, it did a little, it did pump $4 million into the economy every month. That means $4 million worth of demand. That's more money, but didn't create inflation, not much inflation. This did not do what they promised. And then the biggie, there was a promise to reduce the tariff known as the McKinley tariff. An up-and-coming senator from Ohio, remember Ohio, obviously a Republican, because that was a Republican-controlled state. He promised it was a promising cut in the tariff. He proposed it. He was considered, at best, kind of a lightweight, at worst, adult. But he looked like what a senator should look like, and that really does matter to this day. And he proposed it, and it was going to cut the tariff. Cut the tariff. Went to the House, cut the tariff. Cut the tariff. They went to the Reconciliation Committee, where the Senate and the House come together to pass the same bill. Remember, they have to pass the same bill before it goes to the president. They agreed to a bill, everything cut, 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 cut. We're going to cut the tariff, cut the tariff. The president signed the bill, and they were just kidding. It raised the tariff. The whole time, it was a talk of a cut. But the complexities of the law and the fact that most people don't read it, or it was all part of a secret plan, I think it was kind of a combination of them all. They didn't raise it, they raised the tariff. They didn't cut it. 4 big things now. ICC didn't do what it was promised. No inflation. SATA didn't do anything about monopolies, and now the tariff remained. It got even bigger on many items. This was the last straw. Going into 1891, a whole consortium of groups, but it's based on small farmers, would come together and form a new political party called the People's Party. But since it was the people, it's going to be known as the Populists. So we're not the elite. And it was farmers and miners mostly. You know, the miners really liked that idea. They needed more silver. So mine companies were those who worked in mines. They were promised more jobs. They really tried to appeal to laborers, but it never really worked. Urban versus rural bias. And the main driving principle, anti-social Darwinism. Despised social Darwinism. And it wasn't just the hatred of its natural hierarchies. It was also, it had a very religious undertone to this movement, and a lot of it was this feeling that evolution was anti-religion. But they also had some problems. They were anti-immigrant and very intensely anti-urban. This the basis of the party were rural folk, and they didn't trust the city and thought that this town people looked down upon them, etc. It was also this idea of these intellectuals, what they called pointy heads. These pointy heads were cheating them. They're the ones who are rigging the system against them. Even though some of the leaders were very intelligent, that wasn't the point. And anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic means prejudice against whom? Now, anti-Semitic, Semites are anybody from Arabia. All Arabs are Semites. But in the context of this era, when people say that, they normally mean anti-Jewish, even though obviously someone of Arab descent would say, well, wait a second, there's a lot of prejudice against people who are not Jews from the same peninsula. But anyways, that's anti-Jew. And that comes from this myth that goes back to the Middle Ages of the Jewish owner of banks or the Jewish money lender. It goes back to that Middle Age prejudice, which is a pure, unadulterated myth. Even though there were bankers that were Jewish or bankers that weren't Jewish. Yes. And why what? Yeah, that's why. And and especially the vast majority of Jewish immigrants came to the United States who had nothing. They were dirt poor, as the vast majority of Jews who were in what was in the Russian Empire on the Pale had nothing. But this prejudice of this Jewish moneylender. And that really did lead to a divide. Don't forget what I told you earlier when we went over this. This was the most racist time in history. You know, the growth of social Darwinism, the end of slavery, colonies, intensely prejudiced, and they're dividing people up into races and hierarchies, shifting people around. And that lazy's still around today. Clearly, it's not like it was then, but there's still issues. So they met in Omaha in 1892. They came up with the Omaha Convention for the People's Party and the People's Party platform. And I know what you're thinking. Of course they met in Omaha. Omaha is the crossroads of civilization, right? All roads lead to Omaha, the most cosmopolitan town, I would say, in the world. Who agrees with me? Who's been to Omaha? You've been to Omaha? Yeah, and you came back? I imagine it was hard to leave Omaha. Yeah. I know all of you dream someday maybe I could go to Omaha. I've been to Omaha many times, and you can tell, right? Yeah, you can tell. So, we should take a field trip to Omaha. When I mean we, I mean you. Should we put on the yellow bus and send to Omaha?
Yeah.
So, their main goals, inflation. So pump up the money supply. And their inflationary standards would eventually be called by the slogan, free silver. Not giving away silver, but having the government pay to mint silver money, to increase the production of silver. And the big thing is they want to get rid of the gold standard. They had a number of different ideas, different sub-treasury plans. Actually, the best plan they had would be fiat currency. Just basically having the government issue currency, and it's based upon the government's good name to enforce laws and collect taxes, AKA the money we have today. It's much easier to control, it's much more efficient. Yeah. Like the wind, go. And it's also antitrust. Intensely antitrust, anti-monopoly. Especially industries as they saw that were too important for people to be left to profit. Railroads, telegraph, but now they really focused on phone and electricity. And that's pretty forward thinking because those are brand new technologies. And they understood the problem of electricity, the expense of starting electricity and getting it to small farms. Oh, sure, to big cities, there's a big market, but to farmers, they're going to be left out. Which farmers are really going to be left out of electricity until the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt. There's areas of Montana, in north central Montana, that there's an electrical co-op that does their electricity. That was started under the New Deal because electric companies wouldn't go to small towns. So, very much pro-regulation. Next, the direct election of senators. Senators were chosen by state assemblies. Remember, that's in the Constitution. Remember, the Constitution was anti-democratic. So the United States is more and more saying we're a democracy, but don't forget, at this time, there's only one part of the government that's elected by the people. That's the House. And most people could not vote by 1890. So that's not very democratic. So they wanted election of senators by the people. And something happened, an incredibly corrupt election happened in a brand new state that could be used as fodder, as evidence of how corrupt this system was. In fact, they called the Senate the Millionaires Club. Anybody want to guess what brand new state had this shockingly corrupt election? No way, Montana. William Clark, one of the, going to be called Copper Kings, not only bribed his way in, he did it in such an incredibly obvious way. He walked through the House, the brand new Montana House and Senate, which was actually still meeting in the Opera House. The Capitol wasn't built yet. And he was passing out, they used to make $1,000 bills. And he just passed out. Just, here's your money, here's a $1,000 bill. And guess what? He won. Who would have thought it? It was so blatantly corrupt that he would actually have to resign his seat. And that became an example of the corruption in the Senate. Montana, get rid of the regressive reliance on regressive taxes and go to a progressive income tax. Progressive means the higher your income, the higher your tax rates. And very high rates on the wealthy have a salutary effect, a good effect, if you believe in these things. It increases research and development and also increases wages for the bottom. I will talk about progressive income tax more down the road, but I'll explain how that works down the road. I'm just telling you their argument today. We're not to that yet. We'll get to that one. I'll explain exactly how it works for the New Deal. Yeah, it's a, and I mean very high rates. But to give you a quick example, the highest productivity, meaning the most technological advancement, and the highest growth in wages in American history were the 40s, 50s, and 60s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s. The highest marginal income tax rate was 91%. Nobody paid 91% of their income, not even close. But that was the highest marginal rate. It's a third of that. Yeah. Research and development. Hmm? It's about 30. It's 36 or 35.9. Nobody pays that much. Nobody pays that much. That's not the way taxes work. Next, they were pro-union, and I meant to put the hyphen there. And all the union elements we've seen before, but they really emphasize an old age pension. Eventually the United States and other places will call it Social Security. An old age pension, and don't forget, retirement was something new in the Industrial Revolution. And so now what to do after retirement when you can no longer work, but you're still around? You know, that's a big deal. Also, women's rights, civil rights. Even though I've got to be clear, there are a lot of populists who were intensely prejudiced for civil rights. I kind of mentioned their anti-immigrant, anti-urban feeling. So this was not universal. But the big thing is they wanted a regulated capitalist system. They wanted the market. They wanted elements of capitalism, but regular. So not the massive a gap between the rich and the poor. They wanted a bigger middle class. And this is the beginning. We can start seeing it. They're economists. We don't have time to get to like Theodore Veblen, but the beginnings of liberal economics, which you'll see it a little bit in the progressive era under like Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. And then you'll really see it from Franklin Roosevelt all the way till the 1970s, we begin to go away. So, and this really gave the idea of a choice. So, the Republican Party, builders of corporate wealth. This is 1892. The Democratic Party, I just find this one amusing. The builders of saloons and jails. That was anti-Catholic bias. Remember the bias of drunken Irishmen? Remember that bias we talked about before? And remember the 13th Amendment allowed for prison labor? So that's attacking the jails in the South, the prison quota system. And then the People's Party, builders of churches and schools. I find that amusing, but I'm trying to give it a choice. And the big thing is, why this is so important, we've talked about laissez-faire economics, we gave a lot of talk about that. Talk about the idea that, okay, laissez-faire economics and capitalism is wrong, so we talked about socialism. And now this is a view of, they still want capitalism, but regulated and controlled liberal economics. A choice. So, jumping right to here. 1892, then there'll be a third party vying to become one of the two major. Don't forget, we're winner take all. There will never be three parties, big parties with a chance to win. We're stuck with two. So basically, they're hoping to replace one of the two parties. So Harrison's running again, Benjamin Harrison of Ohio, and basically sticking with laissez-faire economics, gold standard. Cleveland promised to do something about the weaknesses of the Sherman Antitrust Act, so he's anti-monopoly. But no one really trusted him for good reason. He wanted to stick with the gold standard. He never said anything about the tariff, and so people did not trust him. But here's a cartoon from 1892. Once again, monopolies as the creature. I really like this one. Made in Colombia, America, the snake with the tentacles wrapped around the Capitol. And, I have monsters on my head. The tail of the snake. By the way, there's something wrong with snakes. Who agrees with me? They're not right. There's no legs. It's just not right. Yeah.
It's because they gave it all to the millipedes.
I did not know that. And there's Uncle Sam. And you see this little baby right here? That's supposed to represent the future. The future.
Why is he all dressed up?
Well, it was part of a New Year's Eve kind of.
Oh, like Baby New Year.
Yeah, Baby New Year, and at the end of the last year was an old man. That's where it came from. So celebrating that, but it's talking about the future. It was a really popular meme. I'm using the word that wasn't even around then. Use them, but a really popular. Now I can't even come up with a word. I want to say slogan in my head, but a popular image of the future as that baby from New Year's. So, and now a third party. Oh, let's be clear about it, just so you know, the magazine is called Puck. All right. First period started commenting on that, so I figured I better make sure. Okay, so there is a alternative, the Populists. James Weaver of Ohio, a third party. And the amazing thing was, for a third party, they did incredibly well. Incredibly well. They took away votes from both parties. Normally, a third party takes away votes from one of the two parties. I'll give you two examples from today. The Democratic Party in Montana actually tries to help the Libertarian Party in Montana, because Libertarians will take away votes from Republicans. Make sense? Some of the biggest donors to Donald Trump are giving money to Robert Kennedy Jr. because they're hoping he'll run as a third party to take away votes from Biden. That's what third parties normally do, because we're stuck with a two-party system. But Cleveland won. It also showed that this was kind of a Democratic booming, and the Democrats are still so split because urban and the South. But look at the green states. Look how many states. And it really looked like Cleveland was going to easily win Montana. It looked like it. But the populists took Democratic votes in Montana. And that's why Harrison won. Montana. I think it goes up.
What's your favorite type of bird?
Park.
Like Jay.
I actually, Stellar Jays are really cool. I like them, even though they're mean. All right, back to this. Montana did really good. The populists did really well. Cleveland was elected president, and I should add, Uncle Grover got married. He got married in office. Actually, that was big news. And then they had a child. And you can imagine, presidents normally aren't the age you're going to have children. So when he had a child, wow, was that a big deal? Was that a big deal? And one confectionery company, what's a confectionery company? Candy. With the new industrial processes of food, they're making something called a candy bar. And they made a candy bar, and they took the name of Cleveland's daughter and named the candy bar after her. Mars? Who said Mars? They named their daughter after the Roman god of war. Anyone know? It's Ruth. Baby Ruth. Yep. Baby Ruth. Who? And when I first heard of Baby Ruth, I thought it was named after the great baseball player Babe Ruth, right? That's Baby Ruth. All right, so almost immediately afterward, the entire economy imploded. So Cleveland got what he wanted, the first ever president to be elected to non-consecutive terms, which I would have thought 10 years ago would be impossible, but it's very possible this year. And the panic hit, and once again, like 1873 and 1837, no one had any idea what to do. These economic ideas are just starting. And the big reason, just like just like the boom bust cycle, oversupply in railroads. And think about it. If railroad production goes down, steel production goes down. So it rippled to every part of the economy. But there was something else. As finance became more complex, they came up with these complex financial instruments, basically different types of bonds. Remember, bonds are ways to loan or borrow money. They literally call them today financial instruments. Like today, things such as derivatives or credit default swaps. I know all you're thinking, can we talk about credit default swaps today? No, you're just going to have to wait. No. And if you hear about credit default swaps, your head will explode. So I'm going to leave the room. But that's why they call it, this is from 1893, Cock Magazine, flim flam finance on Wall Street. Have you ever heard the term flim flam? A flim, it's hard for me to say. Flim flam man is like a con artist, a grifter. Did everyone hear that? A flim flam man. That's what they call them, aspired. And the 1893 panic was very close in a lot of ways to the 2008 panic. It's amazing how these kind of financial instruments keep winding around. 23 is similar, but really close. But also, Cleveland pledged to end the Sherman Silver Purchasing Act. It was a waste of money, he said. And so they repealed it just as the bubble was bursting. Now, they weren't printing or minting any new money out of it. So you can make the argument, well, it was just a waste. But don't forget, every month, $4 million was being pumped into the U.S. economy. Overnight, that ended. All of a sudden, mines had to shut their doors because they couldn't pay for their laborers. And that, therefore, all that money that was being spent, that $4 million, wasn't being spent. It hammered demand. If government cuts spending, it cuts demand. Now, sometimes that could be, you could say, well, that could be a good or bad thing. But if government cuts spending, it cuts demand. And so it made the panic much worse. And once again, this is going to be worldwide. Worldwide. It's going to crush places. In fact, will lead to a horrifically bloody war between Japan and China. When these kind of weird things, how the economy would ripple and increase the arms race across Europe and bring fears of revolution everywhere. Everywhere. An increase in anarchist attacks. And then two big events are going to happen in the United States. Oh, here's a great cartoon of the panic. Isn't that a pretty scary one? I like this one. So, all those financial instruments, bonds, stocks, prop, pieces of paper. You ever get the idea of a piece of paper? What are these? What's this paper worth that says you have this much stock or this much owed to you? You see it? So there's the panic, sweeping everything away, and you see the lines of people, either lining up at the banks when the banks shut their doors or etc. That's a classic panic one. I like that one. Oh, I know what you're also saying, but I want to remember the business cycle. Remember the boom bust cycle I drew for you? So, I thought this was hilarious. When people talk about the business cycle, this is from Econ EdLink. You try to help high schoolers learn education. And this is their picture of a boom bust cycle. Have you learned a lot now? If you're not sure, this is a period of time. Peak, trough, up again. So that's always one of the issues with education or anything else. Sure, people might try to teach a boom bust cycle and then they throw this up there from Econ EdLink. I should have just showed you this. You would know exactly what the boom bust cycle is. A lot about overproduction and bubbles and going back. All right, so, same time, one of the walls in the zoo in Central Park went down and animals started roaming the streets of New York. So, supposedly, a guy fought off a tiger by punching him in the nose. You can punch him in the nose, but you got to jab him a couple times, and then you get him. Who believes you could fight off a tiger by punching him in the nose? 1,000-pound tiger. But I know for a fact you can punch you can punch a shark in the nose, and they'll become your buddy. So, I didn't put the year down. Everyone write down 1894. Put down 1894. Coxey's Army. Jacob Coxey was a small businessman and also a veteran from Ohio. And unemployment hit. All these people are desperate, unemployed, don't have their jobs, or worried about losing their jobs. And these are hardworking people who had a job, but the company shut their doors and they were laid off. You know, the thing about the economy, you can be the hardest working person in the world. But if the place you work isn't making money, you lose your job with everybody else. It's one of the issues with this boom-bust cycle. Well, he came up with an idea. What if we try to find a way to stimulate demand? Private business is no longer hiring people because no one's making money. So let's march to Washington, D.C. and force Congress to pass a law creating government jobs. So the government will create jobs. Government can tax down the road and pay that back. Government go into debt. Government does not have the same restraints that people do. Now, government did have a lot more restraints than today's government because they were on the gold standard. But still, that would stimulate demand, put paychecks in people's hands. And therefore, eventually you wouldn't need it anymore. That was the plan. So here's in West Virginia for Coxey, thousands begin to march. That is in Missoula. Miners, think about miners all of a sudden losing their job. And here's standing on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. And the amazing thing was the House of Representatives actually passed a law to provide government jobs. But the Senate stopped it. And then the members of Congress ran away. This won't be the only time this happens. And they just stayed in Washington, D.C. Now think about it for a second. They call themselves the Provisional Army of the Commonwealth. Common good, Commonwealth. Army marching on the Capitol. What does that sound like? Doesn't it sound like a revolution and war? Well, you can imagine how the Cleveland administration and Congress were panicking. Members of Congress certainly didn't have the guts to go out and meet with them in person, especially if they voted against this bill. And so they rigged a law. They arrested Coxey. They created a law for that fact by saying you cannot walk on the grass, and arrested him. They arrested him for walking on the grass. So he was a political prisoner. They rigged a law, so they arrested him to shut him up. So this, in a way, is like kind of a different way, but the same effect is like, remember the Sedition Acts from 1890s? We'll get to another one called the Espionage Act, which will kind of surprise you. And it died away. Most of the people who did it were desperate. You know, these aren't people who want revolution. These are people that were terrified and hungry. But it looked like a revolution. And I'm not going to explain all these pictures. This is attacking them like they're a vagabond. Here is Coxey from jail. And it's important to see this. Who put this out? People's Party, the Populists. Hey, we're looking for you. We have an answer, not more of the same. And then that same year, a massive strike took place, 1894. The Pullman strike. And you should see a lot of parallels of this in another strike. So, the Pullman company, they made the fancy passenger cars, first-class cars, so you paid more but had better seats on these railways called Pullman cars. And here it is showing them sitting in luxury with, you know, dinner service, things like that. And they had, the workers lived in a company town, they're paid in script, and they had raised the rent in the company town, raised prices in the company store, kept raising it, and the workers were being really squeezed. Now, the Pullman company was not making money, they weren't losing money, but they saw this as a way to squeeze the workers for more profit. And then they cut their pay by a third, after already, in essence, cutting it by raising rents and prices. And this is going to lead to a massive strike. The workers at Pullman are just going to say, no, we can't do this. We can't take another cut. We have to stop this. And so they went on strike, especially because they're being squeezed out of their homes, essentially. And here's one of the Pullman companies. Look how they made factories back then. They really made these much more ornate. The idea was that that would be a show piece. It's kind of cool. They don't make factories like that now. Factories are like really ugly now. They're very utilitarian. You just kind of blah. I see arguments for both. Why should you have a pretty factory, but at the same time, that's pretty nice. Well, Eugene Victor Debs, the head of the American Railway Union, said, we got to join. So that's Debs right there in the right corner. That's him, mid-30s. And we got to join. And so what they did is they would boycott the railway workers said, we won't boycott on any train that had a Pullman car. This is called not crossing the picket line. And what started in Chicago, these Pullman cars were on everything, quickly spread throughout the country. And railway traffic was cut by 50% overnight. And as you can imagine, at a time where your production was already low, this really hit businesses. Remember the same thing happened in 1877 when they shut down railroads completely. So Debs is saying, we got to stop this now or it's going to happen to us. And popular support was pretty much with Debs. Now, before we get to the troops, what happened was this. These are troops standing them down. I'll show the picture in just a sec why that happened. Well, it says in the U.S. Constitution, last thing for today, is that right? Last time we? Yeah. The United States government, it's constitutionally required to deliver the mail. That is in the United States Constitution. Everyone got that? Now, if you just wrote down mail, good for you. Hope you know what that means. We can all write down one word. They're constitutionally required. So what did they do? The railroads put a mail car on every train with a Pullman car. So now they could say the ARU is violating the Constitution by not working on that train. And they made them get back to work. What is a court order called? Okay, a subpoena is for someone to go testify. It's called an injunction. And they got a court to say, you will go back to work. And of course, what do you think Deb said?
Yeah.
No. This is a scam. All right, let me see. Oh. All right, I got to order a pizza. Where did it go? Short answer question I did for the chapter review. Oh, so I'll be, one of your choices will be imperialism and stuff like that. And I'll narrow it down later, but that's the corporation. And I'll tell you what A, B, and C are. Yeah. So you miss a lot of stuff. If you come back on Wednesday, I won't make you take the piss out there. Where are you going? Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, thank you for reminding me. So might be other people.
14-hour days.
Yeah.
Yay.
Just when we get back Wednesday, we'll figure it out.
Awesome.
And I'll post everything you know. You know the routine. Good luck.
Wednesday's gonna be a long catch-up day. So.
Oh yeah, it's gonna. But you know whatever. Give it.
Truman, Eisenhower, about after Eisenhower, JFK,
Yep, JFK, then who?
Carter,
LBJ.
LBJ.
JFK got killed by the CIA.
No way. LBJ. Was that one Carter or Reagan? Nixon. Oh, Nixon, then Ford, because he was kicked out. Then Carter, then Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to the flamingo on that.
Now I just have to.
Oh!
It's on.
I'm about to change the batteries.
Oh, me.
No, we got. Oh, we're nearly out of juice. What do you think?
Is that on?
Yeah, the juice.
Yeah, right.
Well, I think early after.
That flamingo almost brings me to the level of joy that I get from
It's the only reason the
49ers are going to win the Super Bowl.
Well, you know, as long as you're happy for another week. You know, it's nice to have dreams, no matter how much of a pipe dream they are.
30 Sanos, please.
Yes.
I find it cute. I find it quaint.
And I'm like,
Lamar Jackson, dude.
Black out one of the conspirators. Was it you?
What's that?
I blacked out one of the conspirators.
Oh, no. Ah, yeah, could be. Actually, those are those who want like crazy things like higher wages for workers.
Oh.
We're not gonna get those things.
Actually, I gotta raise you.
what are you getting?
That'd be phenomenal.
That's okay.
I don't like, even though I might have one piece, but I hate pizza.
Really?
The sauce is so salty, it's like, I know some people like it, it's so salty.
I can only have pizza.
And Domino's is good, they're consistent, they deliver.
Sometimes it's consistent.
You want me somebody who's tied to it, but
No,
I'll talk around.
No.
Every pizza tastes the same every time. All right, so here we go. Look at this, everybody. So we're probably going to get, and we'll get the kind I like. So I want it uncooked in the center, and the sauce is going to be sugar and tomato sauce with artichokes.
Yeah, this is why you don't like pizza.
And what else?
Lemons.
Ooh, lemon would be good. A lemon pizza, lemon lime pizza. Lemon lime pizza. That's where you want the saltiest tomato sauce from.
Yes. The pizza makes your tomato sauce red. Wild. Oh,
Dude, that is ridiculous. The Mandarin orange. What do you like, Mandarin orange on it?
I've never tried it, so I can't.
Exactly, that's the best.
It's like not even pizza though. It's sci-fi.
It's for AP. I was trying to picky that AP.
I can't get over
I'll be
it.
honest with you.
It's not.
Look,
It's not.
I saw someone else have a seat. Nickel and dime.
Wait, so it's not like,
Harbor Air.
it's not, it's not.
She passed me. She was.
Yeah,
She
but-
was. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a standard format. She was really
It's not, it's not.
Yeah. That's cool. You're looking at it. Even though the questions are, I know all.
Yeah, you get a cheese pizza when you.
All right. So, how you doing? Everybody, before we get started, oh, the camera's running still. Oh yeah, thank you for doing that. Everyone say goodbye to our television world. Some people get really into the pictures.
You're right.